site, and please make sure that all electronic devices are switched to silent. We'll begin with instructions. My name is Deputy Hilary Jearn and I'm the Chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel.
Deputy Tom Coles, Vice Chair.
Deputy Alex Curtis, Panel Member.
Constable David Johnson, Panel Member.
Andy Joe, Constable St John, Minister for Infrastructure.
Ellen Littlechild, Group Director for Operations, Transport and Sport.
Tristan Dodd, Associate Director for Highways, Transport and Infrastructure.
Tim Daniels, Director of Jersey Property Holdings.
Thank you, Minister. We have a number of different areas to talk through today, but I'm going to kick off with waste. And Minister, as you're aware, the panel found, following the review of the budget, that the proposals for a liquid waste charging mechanism are insufficiently developed. You stated that there is work going on in the background where we just need to sort of button down one or two things on the terms of reference. Please can you update the panel on the terms of reference for the liquid waste charging proposals?
Well, the terms of reference are drafted. So initial works have commenced. They were slightly delayed because of the focus on new work streams around the public finances law, and the priority in the first quarter has been around the investing in Jersey Capital Investment Fund. But the work is just about there, both for liquid waste and for solid waste. Earlier this week, I had a briefing on the solid waste strategy, and we'll be ready to share those documents with you in the coming days, or certainly in the next 2 weeks, I should think.
Well, we have a few questions on the solid waste, but on the liquid waste, when do you think we'll see the terms of reference? Will anything happen between now and the end of term?
Are we in a position to share that information? Yeah, we can share the information. Yeah, I think it will need, we look forward to sharing it actually, because we look forward to feedback to see if we need to change the terms of reference or amend the terms of reference. Some good work being done, and clearly the team have done this 2 or 3 times in the past, so they're not starting from scratch. We've been out and looked at what happens elsewhere. There are, as we've discussed at previous hearings, different options that are available to the island. So yeah, we'll be able to share that with you in the next 10 days, I would hope.
And then will it be then for the next minister to take it to
I
consultation?
don't think we're so close to the wire. I don't think that I could launch that and then walk out the door. I think it'll be for the next ministerial team to take forward. But let's not make any bones about it. We've got a hole in the finances going forward. We've identified a liquid waste charge as being one of the ways to close that gap. And I've sat in this room and next door many times talking about the need for us to invest in our infrastructure, and it's not just a catchphrase. That is a reality. We have to invest, and in some cases we're doing some really good work. Let's not forget the fact. I was up at St Peter's recently looking at the new attenuation tank there. I've been to see the work on the Northern Sewer Extension. It's pretty complex, the work they're doing. But we can't stop once, that's going to enable the new affordable homes to come online, but we've still got hundreds of existing properties not connected, and I'll repeat for the last time, we've got Victorian drains running underneath the streets of St Helier, so they won't last forever.
And just as an update for the 2 areas that we're seeing being updated, are they on track? Are they within budget?
Yeah, I think slightly ahead on one, but not enough ahead to get excited. So we're on track and on budget. And it's really, I had people in to see me yesterday. They've been trying to get connected to main strains for decades, and I'm excited that in the future that is going to be a possibility, a real possibility for them, and many others like them. So yeah, and the work at St Peter's is quite, I don't know if you've been there or not as a panel, but it's quite interesting to see the detail of the work and the quality of the work. And again, it's local contractors, so it's really good to see.
And just on, you mentioned the St Peter's work and the attenuation tank. Could you just confirm kind of where the process is now, presuming you've had a recent update, kind of where they are within the kind of the build program of that, delivering the work?
So the they're piling, they're on target, so they're basically receiving two trucks full of cement each day to pump into the piles, which is on track. They've had incredibly wet weather to deal with, so to remain on track throughout that, I think, is a testament to the quality of the teams that are involved, and the planning that's gone into it. So we're working with contractors, but we've got our own staff have been involved in the design and the management, project management. So I pay tribute to all involved. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think moving on to the solid waste strategy, Minister, you've talked about that you have been briefed, but is there more of a time frame to let us know when will the public be able to see the strategy? When is it going to be rolled out?
Well, I think that there were a few questions that I had when I went through the paper with the team. Nothing major, but I think we need to explain to people why we need the strategy, the timescales around that, delivery of that strategy. And there's a very wide scope of works involved in that. But I should think we'd be able to share certainly the draft with you within the next couple of weeks. I'd be quite happy to do that.
And then for the wider public, when?
Well, again, I think it'll probably be published by the new ministerial team, because, as I say, I don't think it's something that I can do as I walk out the door. But I think it's going to be in a good position. I wouldn't expect, and we'd invite feedback from yourselves. I wouldn't expect there'd be much further work required, but I do think it'd be more appropriate for a new minister to be doing that. I'm really disappointed we haven't done it, and that's not through the want of trying. But it's both of them are, I think, are good pieces of work.
And what do you think? Leaving that, understanding that strategy will potentially be launched by a new minister, but what you're obviously very much involved in that, the drafting, the vision. So could you explain a little bit about what that vision, what your vision would be of the strategy, what that roadmap looks like?
So I don't think it's any secret that currently we are processing waste free of charge for commercial entities, and it's not sustainable. We've also done a paper on. I'm not sure what the correct term is. Fridges, basically. What's the
Cooling appliances.
Cooling appliances. Thank you, Ellen. So cooling appliances. So in Europe and the UK, there's the WEEE standards for how you remove electrical appliances, and clearly cooling appliances are more complex because of the mechanism in there. And we've got currently commercial fitters who are delivering us with half a dozen cooling appliances, which actually fill a trailer, and costing us thousands of pounds to export and to be processed. Whereas virtually everywhere else, there'd be some form of charge for that, so that the cooling appliances can be disposed of safely and recycled what can be recycled. So we're just finalising that paper as well.
So that will be coming as part of the strategy, in a sense that that's quite a specific.
I think that'll be separate to the strategy, because we've been out and consulted with the industry. We've also consulted with our colleagues in customer and local services, because some people who we all need fridges basically, and not everybody can afford a fridge. So we help some people in the community to purchase a fridge, and if there's an increase in the charge to dispose of a fridge, then we need to make sure that those people who need support get support.
That's quite a targeted example of a waste stream that you want to handle.
Yeah.
From a legislative perspective, as you're working through the options, you already charge for certain wastes. Broader solid waste charging is obviously something that has to be explored as part of this. Would you have the mechanisms to currently bring in a charge against, say, cooling appliances under existing mechanisms for the receipt of waste without a States Assembly decision? Is it something actually that you or the future minister could have the vires to act on soon?
I believe that the cooling appliances could be brought in by the minister. It's not a case of that we want to charge. We have to find ways of encouraging people to reduce their waste, we have to encourage people to reuse what they've got before they dispose of or recycle. And we receive hundreds of televisions, for example. Now, some jurisdictions might charge you £10 to dispose of a television. We're very mindful that we don't want fly tipping to occur, so we need to be very mindful of that. But equally, we need to be mindful of the cost of disposing of those safely, and where we can recycle. So I think there's been some good work, and I know you've been to La Collette, and I'm super proud of the team at La Collette. They do some great work, but what else could we do? And that strategy will look at that, and it will look at bring banks, which is something we've discussed in the past, and whether we have a La Collette 2 somewhere else, so we reduce the amount of bring backs, but we increase what you can take to a second location to try and reduce vehicle movements. All of that will be in the strategy document.
So, understanding that, in a way, what I'm hearing, Minister, is that the vision is obviously reduce as much as possible, reuse, and then the recycling. And focusing on that recycling, you stated that you'd love to see all 12 parishes having a uniform recycling approach, and the next committee should have a real opportunity to work with the government to get that in place. Could you describe the nature of that opportunity and how committee could go about working with the government on that?
Well, I think it's pretty straightforward, really.
It's not happening yet, so.
No, it's not happening, and if I'm fortunate enough to return to the States as a constable, then I would like to be more involved with the Committee de Connétable, and because I think I really like the report that was produced 2 weeks ago, and I think we should pick up that document and run with it, because there's so many opportunities. In St John's, I can tell you that we're just about to move provider and change how we manage our recycling. So we're moving from boxes to bags, and that's going to be different for our community, but we think it's more efficient. The bags are made from recycled material, and they get recycled again. So there's been some concern about the use of bags. But it's going to be quicker, it's going to be more efficient for us, and hopefully easier for the public to come on board with that scheme.
Within the strategy, Minister, do you also look at, of course you've mentioned La Collette, but there are other recycling processing places, also kind of more private sector based, that receive recycling, and will you be recommending within the strategy to do a review on how those offerings happen, because I've heard, for example, that there's some limitations with the receiving of some of the recycling, which obviously has a knock-on effect back up the chain of how we can recycle.
So clearly, if you're recycling product, you want that product to be clean so that it can be recycled and it's not contaminating other clean product with it. So how you receive product and how you process product is really key to ensure that you get the best from that product. And we see examples every day where some recycling is contaminated, people not cleaning out bottles or cans and stuff, which is really disappointing when it's so easy to do. So it's about education. It's a bit like the drains, where we did a lot of work at Christmas to encourage people not to put their turkey fat in the drains, but to dispose of that properly. It's the same if you're cooking sausages. We want you to dispose of the fat appropriately so it doesn't block up our drains. So we've got a lot of work to do when it comes to waste and educating people.
And in that education, is there a work piece and are you talking, for example, with Andium to make sure that they are providing the facilities to ensure that their tenants are aware that they don't mess up the different bins, because of course there's
I think there's work to do, not only with housing providers but also with our colleagues in planning, because when we're planning new builds in particular, and particularly communal builds, flats, etc., we should ensure that there are sufficient capacities to enable the residents of those units to recycle in an appropriate manner. But I still think that the biggest opportunity is with businesses. When you look at businesses and how they manage their waste, some of them do it incredibly well, and others just throw it all together. And we've got to find ways. I talk about a sharper carrot. we've got to find ways of educating and encouraging those people to do that with us.
And finally, the last hearing, you talked about maybe visiting Newport as a good example. Were you able to visit?
I haven't actually, much to my disappointment, and it's probably, if I do visit Newport, it'll be in a personal capacity now, because I don't think there's much merit in me going as a minister just days away from the end of our term. But I am keen to go and visit that facility, because we shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. If the wheel is turning, we should quite happily pick it up. And
Thank you, Minister. Any
If I
questions?
may, small matter, you mentioned on the recycling, in your parish, you were going to replace boxes with bags. Is that going to be on a fee paying base, so much per bag? And
no, it's going to be free, curbside collecting. We are going to have 3 locations for you to collect your bags from, and only yesterday we discussed whether we would speak to our environmental team to see whether they wanted to volunteer to actually deliver the bags to people's homes. We didn't come to a conclusion yesterday, but the bags will be free, and you get 10 bags of each type, and then you need to replenish your bags. And we've delighted we've got an outlet at Zion, we've got an outlet in the village, and obviously the parish hall.
and so that comes about from the fact that you perceive the boxes not being used as well as they might.
Well, this week is recycling.
Not
week.
challenging that view.
Yeah, this week is recycling week in St John's, so I think we're the only parish that publishes virtually every month that it's recycling week, and it's in our parish calendar to say it's recycling week, but we don't have the level of take-up you'd hope to have. So by doing things differently, it's an opportunity for us to get out there and encourage people again. I think it's been fairly well received, the change. So we're going to watch this space. And I think our new provider is much more open, I would suggest, to recycling, perhaps, than our current provider.
Okay. I think other parishes will watch your space as well.
Thank you, Minister. And over to Deputy Coles.
Thank you. Minister, we're going to go on to a subject around roads, and specifically from me, the draft road traffic drug driving Jersey amendments regulation. Just for a bit of oversight, you've lodged these amendments within the Assembly, and you're proposing, and I've got to get the right terms of the limits. So for PSV and Group 2 licence holder, it's going to be 2 micrograms per litre of blood.
Yeah.
And then for regular drivers, it'd be 5 micrograms of THC per litre of blood.
Yeah.
Minister, please can you explain the decision-making process that were followed in relation to setting these prescribed limits for THC?
So we have consulted with medical professionals, we've consulted with the university, we've consulted with the local police, and a number of driver vehicle standards, and a range of other people, which I think we explained in the briefing that we did with yourselves. I think it's worth noting that following the briefing we did with yourselves, we removed cocaine from the proposed legislation because we were really keen, talking to the police, to get something in for the THC. And there are the 2 limits. If you're like me, you'd probably say it should be 0 for everything. But we understand that people do legitimately take cannabis for medical reasons, and I speak regularly to one of those people who's very concerned about the new legislation and the fact that there's no medical defence. Now, in terms of our discussions and coming up with the levels, the prescribers of medicinal cannabis tell us that if patients are taking their medicinal cannabis as prescribed, not taking more and not taking more frequently, but as prescribed, then the level of the 5 shouldn't be an issue for those people. We currently have legislation where it's illegal to drive under the influence of drink or drugs, and that will still be in place. And what we're trying to do is to help, following our collision reduction strategy, is trying to help enforcement colleagues, and I think I said this in the briefing, we don't want to prosecute anyone that would be our ultimate, not to prosecute anyone. This is again is about educating people and encouraging people to be thoughtful in what they're doing. So if they are taking cannabis, whether that's prescribed or not, then they consider whether it's safe to drive or not. Just as people who have a drink have to make that decision whether it's safe to drive or not. And there's been a huge amount of resource and energy expanded in the anti-drink driving message, and I think we've got to do something similar with drugs. And I think when we had the briefing, the police told you that drug driving is more of an issue for them currently than drink driving. So.
And did you consult at all with any of the disability and inclusion groups and seeing how, because people will be using cannabis for chronic conditions and chronic pain, and so this might be their only access to be able to be mobile.
Yeah, but I don't know if we did.
I can't recall exactly, but what we did do is that we spoke to people who are expert in what would cause impairment in driving. It's about being safe to drive. And the advice was that the 5 micrograms per litre would be safe, and that would reflect the medical defence in the UK effectively. While there's not been, we can report back whether there's been a specific consultation, the actual objective covers that, and that is when people are safe to drive on the road.
With not having this medical defence, are we not then creating a situation where we're treating recreational users and medicinal users the same, and there's no distinction between actually one is using cannabis for medical purposes as prescribed, but you have people who are using it recreationally, and that as it stands is actually illegal?
Yeah, so it goes back to my point, doesn't it, about whether you should have 0 and then allow people who are on medicinal cannabis to have up to 5. We believe that what we've come up with is a process where by having the 5 for regular drivers and having 2 for professional drivers, we believe that is, and we've looked at other jurisdictions. It's probably easier to follow and allow them medical defence, but the big issue for us is THC, drivers who are driving with high levels of THC, and the current situation, the inability. Anybody that's driving today, or if this law gets passed, anybody driving that is driving sensibly and safely, there's no reason for them to get stopped and tested. If the police have concern about somebody's driving, they'll have the ability to do a roadside test, and then should drugs be found to be present, they will go back to police headquarters where a blood sample will be taken, just as it is with alcohol.
Might I just add to that? There is already, of course, legislation around prohibited substances. So the legislation in the motor traffic law really focuses, it's a risk-based approach as to what would cause impairment against driving. And that's the legislation that's being brought forward now. So it doesn't undermine the prohibited substances part of it, which is covered elsewhere.
There's the point around impairment and driving, and obviously with the set limit of 5 micrograms for anybody who's not a Class 2 or a SV driver. But how does this interact then with somebody who is clearly visibly impaired but actually falls below these limits?
So if they're visibly impaired and it can be proven that they're impaired, they'd still be driving against the law. They would still be breaking the law, because they would be could be prosecuted for driving under the influence of drink or drugs, is my understanding.
That's right, yeah. So you're not allowed to... the police officer has to have due cause, and if someone is impaired through whatever substance, then there is grounds for prosecution. But this makes it easier to collect the evidence and makes it much more likely to be prosecution to be successful in the case of cannabis, where the police have identified the main risk is.
And I think it's worth reminding ourselves that we've all got different tolerances to alcohol. Some people appear to be able to drink more alcohol than others, but we have one limit. We don't have a limit for functioning alcoholics. Functioning alcoholics will have to abide by the same limits as people like myself. So, the best advice is not to drink and drive.
I mean, when you mentioned about the roadside testing, does the quality of these types of tests, they fall within your jurisdiction, or is it Home Affairs?
So it would be Home Affairs that would administer the law. I think the roadside testing is improving all the time, but ultimately it'll be a blood test that would deem whether somebody is prosecuted or not. So I don't think we have to be too concerned about the quality of the roadside testing. We're going to buy kits, or the police will buy kits that are proven, but nobody would be able to be prosecuted under this legislation from the results of a roadside test. My understanding from the briefing we did with the other two panels is that the breathalyzers that are used now for alcohol are far more advanced than when they started, and you could potentially prosecute from a breathalyzer result in the future. And we heard that in, I think it was Sweden, that they're using AI technology to look at people's eyes to see whether people have impacted by drink or drugs. So technology will continue to improve quickly, and what we're trying to do is to get in the drug limits for roadside testing, and I think that will go further in the future.
We have received submissions from the public, obviously, but since this has been lodged to us as scrutiny, and one of those mentioned around other jurisdictions and might be moving away from roadside limits of cannabis to find alternative methods. I suppose, do you believe that these regulations coming going to be flexible enough to adapt to this, or?
Well, the current proposals would enable the relevant minister in the future to add limits, to change limits. And, I've mulled that over several times, whether that's appropriate or whether it should go to the Assembly. I've been convinced that it's appropriate for a minister to do that, but other people may have a different view.
And of course, cannabis is not only the only medical and recreational drug that's on the market, and will create other problems. I mean, you mentioned cocaine. Obviously, cocaine is used in some dental processes and things. We've also got things like opioids and amphetamines. What sort of work's been done down those routes yet?
I couldn't honestly tell you, but I am aware. But I go back to, it's about risk, isn't it? And the highest risk at the moment is because of the amount of people the police believe to be driving with unacceptable levels of THC in their blood. And that's what we're trying to address in the first instance. And as I said just before, the legislation will allow future ministers to add drug limits in the future for specific substances, I dare say. But
I would just add on, yes, we did look at other substances, but what I'd add on at the moment, I agree with the Minister's comments about the risk-based approach, but at the moment where an officer has due cause to stop a vehicle and they appear to be driving under the influence, then prosecutions can still be brought that way. But the new legislation just increases the likelihood of success of that prosecution in the case of cannabinoids.
And obviously you mentioned that you've got...
Cannabinoids. I was wondering about that.
So just to confirm, then in the future, would there be an opportunity to amend this to add other
Yes.
drugs? And would this then come back to the Assembly, or would it be?
Well, the current legislation is that it would, the minister, and I think it's the Home Affairs Minister actually, rather than the Infrastructure Minister, would be able to make changes.
Without going to the estates?
And I have considered bringing my own amendment to bring it back to the Assembly. So far I've been persuaded not to lodge that amendment, but if somebody lodged that kind of amendment, I'd be quite relaxed.
And this same ministerial order is where you're talking about adding things like cocaine onto this list.
Yeah, my personal view, and again it's a personal view, is that cocaine should be zero. And notwithstanding the point you make about it being used in some medicines, I think I'm staggered that we even considered having a level.
I mean, one of the other challenges around, especially around cannabis and THC, is that we know that our cannabis clinics aren't very well regulated. So we don't know if there's consistent labelling across cannabis products around the risks around driving and their prescriptions and the risk of impairment. Again, I know this is not your remit, but what conversation are you having with the Minister for the Environment and Health around making this clear and transparent?
So Health have been involved in the development of this legislation. Officers from Health and officers from Home Affairs, as well as our own team. So I think there's been a wide variation of considerations. But, you know, if people aren't sure, then the best advice is for them not to drive because, you know, our collision and reduction plan is very clear that we've got a lot of work to do. And we see this as one of the priorities to try and help reduce collisions.
But I think, just to be clear, in our discussion with medical cannabis prescribers, they do speak to their patients, give them that advice, and that is also followed up with written advice with the prescription.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Curtis.
Moving on to traffic, roadworks and transport, starting with the works on the Northern Sewer Network upgrade. Minister, what's the latest update on works compared to when we last spoke? And in particular, do you have any updates around involvement with businesses who may be affected or where that would change?
So we've met with some local businesses. I'm really concerned about one of the garages, which is right next to the road, where I don't believe they're going to be able to operate whilst we're digging the road right next to them, because from a health and safety perspective, I haven't had that confirmed personally, but I've had anecdotal evidence of that. We've met with businesses. I've met with my colleague, the Economy Minister. You know, we're looking to see whether or not some kind of payroll support mechanism is achievable. A payroll mechanism would need to have funding, which certainly infrastructure don't have funding for that. Some businesses are actually benefiting, oddly enough, but we fully understand the pain of some other businesses. And we've encouraged people to promote. We're trying to help businesses promote. The works are on schedule, which is encouraging. The diversions have changed slightly, although I haven't changed my way of going through the diversion. And there's further works. You know, the next change will be to the southern end of that work, which will see all of us having to go up Grand Route de Montaleve, which is a green lane, not a 20-mile-an-hour green lane. We are looking to put speed monitoring devices in some of those areas. In fact, the Constable of Trinity went on a site visit last Friday. Unfortunately, I was unable to join him. But we're looking at, we've had both honorary police and states police in the area monitoring. We're looking at whether we can introduce some bollards to create a virtual pavement in some areas where the road is wide enough. That would have two benefits. It would allow people who walk along that road, and they've got no alternative but to walk along that road, whether to get a bus or to walk their dog when they come out of their house. But it would also have the benefit of slowing the traffic down if the carriageway is narrower. So it's constantly under review, and we've got contractors who drive the diversions at least 3 times a day, checking on signs, etc. They're pretty responsive. In fact, between Christmas and New Year, I was delivering calendars down one lane, and somebody asked me why there weren't more 20-mile-an-hour signs. I saw the chap doing his inspection. I stopped him. I asked him if he could put more signs out, because we'd asked them the week before, and the signs were there when I got back, so it was pretty impressive. You know, we understand the disruption for people, and it's a long disruption, but it's a necessary disruption, unfortunately.
So turning to the potential for economic support, payroll, all those, have you got any more substantive ideas as to how that would work? And what I would ask is, do you consider that the Northern Sewer upgrade is sufficiently exceptional to other works, given, you know, one could enter, you know, in any decision in trying to help a business now, a risky area where kind of a partial closure out of somewhere for a day.
But that is part of the challenge, and not only the time is a challenge, but the distance is a challenge. So when you make a diversion, vehicles are a bit like water. They find a way, don't they? It finds a way. If it gets blocked somewhere, then it will go off and find a different way. So, as I said earlier, some businesses that you don't think would be impacted may be impacted because people change their journeys. So the road outside one of the large garages is not being closed, but they've seen a significant impact on passing trade, which therefore means that not only do they sell less fuel, but they also sell fewer cars. And they've been quite innovative in what they're doing in terms of home visits and all that kind of stuff. But if you see something that you like and it's shiny and new, you might stop and have a look at that. But if you don't go past, you're not going to see that shiny and new thing. But how far away from the roadworks do you draw your line, and what is the timescale? So those are the type of things that the officers are looking at to try and consider. But it is very unusual for us to do roadworks for over 12 months in the same area.
Okay, and so that you feel that should a scheme come forward, it would be suitably defensible that it isn't the norm now that roadworks outside. You can see I'm just trying to understand how you play this through with officers.
I fully understand that, and it's we do a lot of our roadworks in the school holidays because we know that we've got 20% less traffic on the road in school holidays, so we try to minimise disruption. There is, believe it or not, a lot of planning that goes into the major works, and there can be up to 5,000 different pieces of work in a year that take place on our roads, and 10% of that, up to 10% of that, can be emergency, so it's not planned, and we don't know. But we do make mistakes. Yesterday I drove down Gloucester Street to find that Seaton Place was closed at the same time that we've got a lane restriction on the Esplanade. Now that doesn't make any sense to do that work together whatsoever. I was pleased today when I drove down Gloucester Street that the Esplanade was back to normal. I've asked the team to look at, can you put these Harris fencing on wheels so that you can not do the work during the rush hour and you can bring the fence into the site, and then when the rush hour is passed, you can then make the area safe for work to carry on. And so the team are looking at that for us. But we're fully, the roadworks impact on a lot of people. I pay tribute to the bus drivers, for example, who are doing an amazing job. And when I was on the bus last Tuesday morning, it's tough for them. Yeah. It's tough for them to drive down some of these narrow lanes and operate. But they're doing a great job, I think.
Okay, one final thing on the Northern SU upgrade was around technology. And in our last quarterly hearing, you mentioned you might look to trial technology or other devices to kind of capture either traffic movement or where there's non-compliance. Has anything been progressed with regards to
so I spoke
deployment?
to the lead officer from the drainage team last Friday. As I said, I wasn't able to make the meeting, so I had a call with him, and they're actively looking at placing some traffic monitoring devices. I think one or two landowners weren't keen on placing the devices, from what I can gather, which is disappointing. But I think, in general, if you go at the rush hour, and it's not just the roads with diversions on. So people are going, a lot more people are using more Coshaw, and they're using green lanes to access more Coshaw, which they wouldn't normally do. They would normally access the main roads. Yeah. So the disruption isn't limited to the diversions.
Okay.
But we have to say thanks to the honorary police who are doing their best. They are volunteers, and I'm pleased with the support we've also had from the States Police. But we're not out 24/7 monitoring these roads.
Okay,
We've got big signs. We've got big signs that tell people you could be subject to a fine of up to £1,000 if you ignore it, and people drive past it. Now, I'd love to be able to use cameras and prosecute these people, because you wouldn't have to prosecute many people for others to take notice.
I just add two more things. Is 75% of all roadworks take place off peak, so they don't affect that peak hour traffic. The other part of it is that we work closely with planning to try and ensure that fields that are brought forward for development are aligned with infrastructure, with the carrying capacity, and that's the roadworks are to do with the carrying capacity of the infrastructure. So you do need to have that carrying capacity if you're going to do development and provide affordable housing and the like.
Okay. We'll move on to buses, Minister, and we'll start by looking at the recent importation of 22 new buses in December by Liberty Bus. Now, the 2025 bus operator contract looked at a roadmap to decarbonisation as part of the bid. And we did ask the Minister of Environment about buses on a number of facts, and he expressed, in some ways, a bit of disappointment that the level of new buses at this point were diesel and not fully electrified like some of the fleet. Could you provide a bit of information as to kind of the conversation with the Liberty Bus about the recent latest fleet of diesel buses?
Well, the bus service, which is something I use regularly, has got to be sustainable. And, we're not talking about dirty old diesel engines. We're talking about modern diesel engines. We've got huge benefits from the technology. The Euro 6 engine is far cleaner than the buses they're replacing. Yes, they're running on diesel, but it's far cleaner than the vehicles. The cost of an electric bus is significantly greater than the cost of a diesel bus. And the challenge for fleet operators in Jersey, and I speak from a lot of experience here, is the lack of mileage that vehicles do in Jersey to generate the savings from not burning fossil fuels to make them viable. So what that means is if you spent £100 a week on fuel in a conventional vehicle and you were only spending £20 on electric or whatever that is, you've got the £80 a week to play with. In Jersey, the distance isn't great enough to generate that kind of a saving. So we are aspirational to get more electric vehicles, but the fleet needed upgrading, and we are looking to bring in additional vehicles, electric vehicles in the future. I don't know if you've ridden on one of the new buses, but they're much more comfortable. The seats are like a coach. We've got fantastic visual displays and audio displays, so you can't get lost even in the dark now. You're told where your bus is, so that's really good, although it does have challenges with the diversions, I have to say. And we were moving away from Serville Cemetery the other day, and the sign said it was at Serville Cemetery. But in general, it's a real great improvement, and I think, I hope that customers are enjoying their ride on these new vehicles, notwithstanding they aren't electric, but they are practical, and I'm really pleased with them. And colleagues from the DVS went to the factory to see them being built, and they were very complimentary about the quality of the build. And I know, talking to the operator only last week, that they're pleased with the initial results.
Okay, so you're happy with the kind of the cost benefit of Euro 6 diesels compared to the viability,
in a perfect
right
world,
now that's the right balance for this, but
absolutely, and it didn't come as a surprise to us, because it was part of the plan.
Okay. Staying on costs, Minister. The price of buses, not the bus itself, but the ticket price. It's been noted that it's moved now from £2.55 to £2.75 for a single bus ticket. Child fares have moved from £1.27 by card to £1.40. Now, we also spoke to the Minister for Environment about his responsibility for driving greater active transport, shared transport through planning policy. Could you kind of comment on this recent rise and how you feel that kind of reflects broader government policy and how that works alongside our wider ambition?
I think for the first time since they've been operating Liberty Bus, I encourage them to advertise the value of the bus compared to the cost of parking in Jersey. And previous ministers hadn't been keen to do that because it means we're losing revenue from car parks. But I think we've got a commitment to drive people to alternative transport, and buses is a good way of doing that. I'm not sure the numbers off the top of my head. It's something like £60 for a monthly pass. if you use the bus every day, it's £1 each way if you're using it once a day. So it's really, really good value compared to paying £8 a day for parking, for example. So we have to make sure that the bus company is sustainable and viable. 44% of people that ride on the bus don't pay. You can get a bus pass before you're a pensioner, because we still give out bus passes at 65. So that's an area that needs to be looked at. We also need to consider whether or not we limit the times that some concessionary fares use the bus. So we've got people commuting to and from work on concessionary fares, and sometimes fare-paying customers can't get on the bus because the bus is full. And we see, it is always a balance. And I think what we've got is a very good operator with new fleet, and the key things are comfort, convenience, and cost. So the comfort with the new buses, investment, and the refurbishment of some of their existing buses is a good thing. The convenience, you've seen the work that we're doing. We're causing a lot of inconvenience with the Western Bus Gateway. But no pain and no gain, because that will take 3, 4, 5 minutes off some journeys. And if you've got 70 people sat on a bus, that's a fantastic benefit. And the cost, I think, is still excellent value for money.
I guess, and in our querying to you today, we're not criticising the operator. We're just looking to explore the rationale behind the decisions being made. There's, your example of a season pass shows a stark difference, but an interesting hurdle for the average person, testing the water with the bus, changing their habits. Is that you'd go from £1 a day if you're using it twice for work, to £5, 50.
I think there's quite a bit of work needs to be
£2
done
£5.50
on the fare structure, because I think that the monthly passes and the annual pass, which is something like £500 a year, is incredible value. And some businesses, our colleagues in ECO encourage some businesses to work with their staff so they can pay a monthly, but they can buy the business buys the annual ticket. The staff member has money taken out of their wages, so they pay monthly, and they benefit from a terrific rate on the buses. And even if you do pay the full price for a bus, it is still cheaper than our parking rates, and our parking rates in Jersey are very low. So I think it's great value. I'm keen for the bus companies to do more marketing, whether they offer somebody a trial week or something. And we're looking at a whole range of initiatives. We've seen ridership on the town hopper bus service double since we came into office 2 years ago. Double the ridership, and there's still lots of capacity on the hopper bus, which enables residents and visitors to get around St Helier. And we've got to try and encourage more people to use the bus. And we've just got there's a lot more work. Believe you me, I put the bus company through hoops. They came to see me 3 times before I'd agreed to their price rise. And officers will assure you that they weren't just given an easy ride. But we have to have a viable bus service. It's got to be sustainable. We want them to invest in rolling stock, new rolling stock, maintain and enhance their existing rolling stock. And, the concessionary fares are a great story, aren't they? When you've got almost half the people on the bus don't pay. That's fantastic.
Can I
It
just
depends
add
on which side of the concessionary fare you are.
Well, you and I, Deputy, are paying for that, aren't we? Because we're paying customers. But it is great. And, I talk to, my community. If you get the bus on a Friday or Saturday night, it tends to be more senior members of our community, if I can say that, who are enjoying that opportunity to use their bus passes.
Can I just add a little bit of context? I agree with everything that the Minister said. It's important to remember how we got to where we are. So when Liberty Bus came in 2013, nearly all the fares were cash fares, and that slowed down boarding, reduced reliability, and had costs with the cash handling. So it was a good thing to do, was to encourage people to go to contactless, whether it be a debit card or an Avanci card, because it increases the reliability of the bus service. So the cost of inflation since then has gone up by 56%. The cost of the monthly pass has only gone up by 19%. It's been held artificially low to encourage that transfer.
But what's the increase been on regular fees? So 19% on that seasonal It's created a very
On the monthly.
On the
yes,
monthly.
which is one of the most popular products.
and on a, let's say, the standard method of payment fare. So now that would be contactless. I wouldn't say that. So your
Yeah.
Punchy card, it wouldn't be cash. What's been the increase comparison compared to 2013? Because
So-
19 is a great number to hear for that compared to 56%. But
So 19, so for regular bus travellers, the monthly pass is the most popular because it adds that value. You can travel twice a day, it's unlimited during the month. And so that's why I quoted that one. I don't have the figure for the just using your debit card, but again, that's been held artificially low to encourage that transfer to electronic payments.
Okay.
So it will be below the inflation
we can share
points.
that.
if you could,
We can
because
share that.
because I think a lot of people are looking at this latest increase, which is 20p on 275. So what's circa 7.5-8% increase at a time when inflation's sitting around the 3.5. So it's clearly a large increase. If this was a government provided service, we'd be looking at having an exemption for 2.5% over more than 2.5%. And that's just where the question is coming from, and I hope that feedback's landing. That
Yeah.
it's considered a significant increase to a lot of
Believe you
people.
me, I had to take some convincing that the fares should increase by the level they've increased, and I was convinced. And that wasn't in the initial meeting. We had 2 or 3 meetings to discuss it.
Okay.
And I do think we and our colleagues at the bus company have got to focus on the value that we provide, because it's a terrific service. And I think it's tomorrow and Monday people can go to the bus station for consultation on the summer service. So, and if you look at their results, their net promoter score in terms of the service they provide, they are incredibly good. And
Okay.
any organisation would be proud to have that net promoter score.
Okay, moving to another.
So just last point, it's also the cost of bus travel has stayed below the cost of motoring and parking and all those other alternatives. So it does provide really good value.
Turning to the Western Bus Gateway, Minister, could you provide an update on the works to deliver this and the time frame before we dive into a bit more about what it's going to actually do?
So the Western Bus Gateway, I'm not aware that it's behind schedule. I think it is on schedule. And I think it's going to be, not only is it going to be efficient and effective, but it's also going to enhance that area of St Helens.
So for the benefit of those listening in, what is the schedule again, just so we don't have to...
Well, I have to look to my left to ask Trish.
The completion date of all the works, that's including all traffic light works that have to be done, is October.
Okay, and that's within budget still?
Yes.
Okay, October.
And just to confirm, will the avenue will it be closed again? Will there be more closures
It
within
depends
that?
on the phase. So we've just cleared the avenue, so that's reopened again now. But when we come to do some of the cabling works for the traffic lights later on in the year, yes, it will have to be. There'll be restrictions at certain points during the works to able to undertake certain activities.
So over the course of the publication of the Western Bus Gateway from 2023-22 onwards, there's been a discussion around the savings in time that it'll have for the bus. What's the current kind of perspective as to what this will deliver in savings for buses, and has there been a change, or refinement in the expected benefit over the course of the...
I think you can read in publications as I have anywhere between 2 and 5 minutes per bus, and I think it really depends on the day and the time and the season. But we know that the eastern solution, by allowing buses to go in front of the Pombal Hotel and access the tunnel, has saved significant time, particularly at peak times, and we believe the same will be true for the Western Bus Gateway. And I think the fact that several taxi drivers have asked me if they'll be able to use it as well would indicate that they're aware of the congestion at certain times of the day. I'm not minded to allow the taxis to use it, but I am considering the Balroyal. This will be news to my officers, but I am considering the request for Balroyal for taxis to be able to use that bus lane, which we see is very common use around the UK and Europe, where buses and taxis share a lane.
Just from the obvious, I'm sure most of us have experienced it, but we've also seen the concerns of the fact that there was a backup. There's quite a lot of traffic from that that closure that we've seen, was there any lessons learnt that could possibly, the next time it's
Well,
closed,
I think there's two.
help to
Yeah, of course there
reduce
is,
it?
and I think you'll see it, as I saw today. The first time we did work on the Esplanade element of that, we closed. You couldn't turn left into the Esplanade, yet traffic could head west along the Esplanade. And I went one lunchtime during the state sitting with officers to have a look and to explain my view where they could keep the eastern operation open and close the road for western, which would have far less impact on people. So we've learned from that, we've done that. And as I mentioned earlier, I personally think that if we put that Harris fencing on wheels, we could just roll it out after the rush hour so that people can work in a safe manner, and then roll it back at the end of the day so that traffic in the evening can circulate more freely. It's easy for me to say. I'm not the engineer, and I'm waiting for feedback from officers as to how feasible that is or isn't. But I do think there are solutions.
General point for me, I mean, going back to that route, I mean, as a matter of course, do the engineers look at the alignment of traffic lights? I mean, my personal experience is that they don't synchronise enough.
Yes, they do. And we've got a team of people who I say a team. We've got some officers who do that, and I understood that the sequence had been changed for the roadworks.
So
but
we do change the priority and we tweak it, and we've got great knowledge. I mean, the issue is, and it goes back to where I spoke before about carrying capacity, that infrastructure from the tunnel, that part there is at its limit. So it only takes a small change to have a big increase in congestion. The difference between summer traffic, holiday traffic and normal traffic is about 15%, but it's about a 50% increase in congestion because it's close to that tipping point. The solution is making the bus service more reliable, getting more people on the buses. You can't build your way out of traffic capacity that's been shown elsewhere. So if you look at it strategically, the only solution we've really got is to get people using active and bus travel.
So my general question is, when you do any sort of roadworks,
Yes,
whether the
we
alignment
always-
of lights, because there were times when it was snarled because
We always do, but it's always important also to look where you're getting people to. So if you're just getting them through one section to join another traffic jam further on, then you're not actually decreasing the journey time. So you've got to look at the network as a whole.
A good example of that is somebody wrote to me and suggested that the centre laning Gloucester Street you should be able to turn left and right, and I thought that's a great idea. But officers, it took a while for me to understand, but officers explained to me that what you're doing, Minister, is you're going from one jam to another jam. You're not actually gaining anything. And so it was safer to leave the 2 lanes going right and 1 lane going left. I got it eventually, didn't I, Joseph?
Yeah, it's often.
We'll wrap up on buses in just a minute, but on the Western Bus Gate, as you mentioned, Minister, there's 2 to 5 minutes potential improvement depending on the time of day.
Yeah.
Have we published any impact on other road users by the fact that this introduces a further set of signalling to allow the buses through?
Well,
So-
the buses will cross when the pedestrians are crossing, so there shouldn't be delays. But you know, if you look at our transport hierarchy, then we're trying to get more people active travel and buses, and fewer people relying on their cars. So, you know, interesting, I was at the school council event yesterday. I was there to talk about Fort Regent, but they gave some feedback about previous school council sessions, and they were talking there about transport and buses, so it was really quite interesting.
Deputy Coles, I think, has a question.
So you're saying the bus gateway is going to work on the pedestrian signalling, but
Yes.
which side of which lane? Because obviously if you've got the westbound traffic, that stops when traffic comes out of Gloucester Street, but the eastbound pedestrian crossing is when people are not coming out of Gloucester Street, but the people will be coming eastbound from the avenue. So that has to be an additional stop point.
So I won't go into the timing of the traffic lights, but it's being calculated out by the traffic engineers to work in what we call the intergreen, which is the time with the pedestrian crossings. The other important thing to remember is you'll have less demand on the crossing over to the Frigate stop because people will no longer have to cross the road to get to that bus stop, and that's a very heavily used stop. So people will gravitate to the new one at the bottom of Gloucester Street. So that also reduces the demand further downstream.
Okay, I would note that there's probably a communication exercise on that, because I think this has gathered a lot of public media comments, and whether they realise that there are opportunities to integrate, not compete with the network, would probably be something that would be worthwhile
Yeah, I
sharing.
think it's fair feedback.
Lastly, on the buses, a general question about improvements. Are there any other improvements planned for the network at the moment?
Well, I think we're always looking to improve.
Any specific ones that are kind of in the pipeline to change or amend the network to improve?
Well,
service?
as I've said earlier in the hearing, we've got the consultation on the summer timetable. That takes, I think it's the end of this week and early next week, isn't it?
That's correct.
That takes place. But we see lots of the routes now that operate what used to be the summer timetable throughout the year, which is terrific. And, you know, the consistency of buses and the frequency is really key. You know, we've got the number 10, which everybody I spoke to thought was a great idea, but it's had very disappointing usage to date. And, you know, I had two people to see me last night. The lady came in holding the number 10 bus thing. I said, "Have you used that?" "No," she said. "I didn't know about it." So we've got more work to do.
Okay, moving off buses and onto something raised by a member of the public to the panel, which is age restrictions on motor licences, and in particular the concern that we are currently restricting the age of applying for a moped licence to 16, and noted that actually this isn't the same in all jurisdictions in Guernsey. So under your tenure, Minister, and the operation of business as usual, has there been any consideration to the current age restrictions on moped users?
In a word, no.
Okay.
I'm aware that you know, I think Alderney used to be able to ride a motorbike at 14. I think when I was growing up
Without a helmet.
without a helmet. The one area that I'm really disappointed that we haven't progressed whilst I've been minister is S-pedelecs. So that is electric bikes that can do more than 15 miles an hour. And I've seen this work successfully in other jurisdictions where the rider has to have insurance, the rider has to wear a helmet, and the bike has to have a number plate. And I'm so disappointed that I thought that was such a quick win to introduce. And it hasn't happened for whatever reason. But I'm not aware of any demand, for want of a better description, for us to lower the age of people to ride mopeds. What I'm pleased about is the work we're doing with schools around safety with particularly motorcycles, and you've met the road safety people, and we're spending more time in educational settings talking to them about the importance of safe motoring, but in particular motorcycling.
Can I just add a little bit onto that, just in terms of risk? So the collision data we've got shows 16 to 18-year-olds are the people who have the highest number or the most at risk on two wheels. I think reducing it to 15 would further increase the number of casualties in those age groups.
Under 14? You'd say further still in your
I'm-
mind.
Yeah, to be able to travel at those speeds. I mean, it's just physics and the capability of the human body to take those impacts where people lose control due to lack of experience.
I'm curious on that concept of risk and permissiveness in the system, and how, Minister, you've been presented or otherwise, whether what we have across our whole licensing system for motor vehicles is fit for purpose. And one thing that I draw attention to is in 2021, the UK made more permissive the towing capacity for trailers from 750 kilo. They reversed the decision on that for B&E class licenses. Do you get any updates as to kind of to stay abreast of the latest changes and whether we have options in Jersey?
I think we've done that, haven't we? I recently signed some ministerial decisions for towing trailers and also for minibus use if it's not for hire. So a lot of us would have got a minibus licence when we passed our driving test. And Guernsey have done this for some time. And when I went to Guernsey 12 months ago, I was talking to their minister, who, or the head of their committee, who told me what they were doing for minibus driving. And I believe that we've recently changed that. Whether it's coming
So
or not, I don't know.
DVS monitor what's happening in elsewhere in the UK in particular, because our driving licences are exchangeable. So we try to keep them as comparable as possible.
So I think the important thing is that the changes that we've made is for on island. So you couldn't go to another jurisdiction and drive a trailer, but you could drive it locally. And that's based on the risk. You know, that you're limited here to 40 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour with a trailer. And so, yeah, we can get you the
So these
information
recent
on it.
changes that you've just been kind of to kind of relax towing capacity,
Yeah.
and again, kind of at the same time, did you consider that the UK position on moped licenses for those who have car licenses, where they just require a CBT to drive that, whereas over here we
I
require.
wasn't asked,
You weren't
to
asked about that
consider
one.
I think if we look at age and driving, I think I'm probably more concerned about some of the senior members of our community that can get a license for 10 years and their health sadly may deteriorate over that period of time. And I'm watching with interest where a regular eye testing, for example, is being introduced. And I think there's probably, again, based on a risk process, there's probably more merit in looking at whether we test some of our more senior citizens for driving. We've got people driving their 90s beautifully, and you know, isn't that great and to be encouraged? But equally, the hardest job, and I'm sure David would concur, the hardest job a constable has is removing somebody's driving licence, and sadly at times we have to do that far too often. But I do think that there's merit in looking at that again. Again, it brings costs to people, but I don't think locally we've necessarily got the data that suggests it's an issue, but I think it's something that needs a watching brief.
Okay, if you could share those ministerial decisions, we'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Right.
Connor
Yes, on to different subject, which is gas infrastructure. So, two, three questions on that. It's been reported in the media recently that suspected gas leak reporting by islanders has increased by 600% since 2020. Are you seeing a corresponding increase in incidents of road closures or diversions as a result of those concerns expressed by islanders?
Well, I think there's been great progress made with Island Energy in terms of their compliance to the requirements for roadworks, notifications, signage, etc. And I think one of our team, Warwick's done a great piece of work with that organisation to improve things. We were, I think we've mentioned at this panel before, we introduced our own monitoring because we have staff who go into the drains to clear that sausage fat, as I mentioned earlier, and other fat from drains. So before we go into a drain, we will test. Now, at the moment, there's a lower risk because there's so much volume going through the drains due to the high amount of rain we've had recently. But once that subsides, then we will start to introduce our random testing again. But I think the results of the random testing, we had some pinch points which Island Energy have resolved, but we will probably bring back random testing ourselves on their network.
Partially answering its question about mitigation measures. There are
so
plans to.
I think it's probably 2 years ago we found ourselves in a position where we with the concerns that were being raised with the high instances, we started to do our own monitoring because when we put staff underground, it's a risky place for people to be. So we have to make sure that it's safe for them. And so, as a matter of course, we would test before we put anybody underground, and that will continue. But I do think they are working hard to improve their infrastructure. We get frustrated if we drive up More Failor, the amount of times that road has been closed, but I think they've replaced about 800 metres of network up there over a period of time. And the other thing we're trying to do, and some utilities do this better than others, is to advertise which utility is doing the work, because I get the blame for everything, which I've got broad shoulders. But if it's the electric company, we should sit, and they're probably one of the best to say that they're doing the work. And the other utilities, we're trying to encourage, if there's traffic lights, that we know which utility is doing the work. We have to invest more in our infrastructure, as I repeatedly say, not just as a government, but our utilities have to invest as well.
Thanks, sir. Going back to your own monitoring, are you satisfied that you're fully acquainted with the whole network, not just the current pipelines, but disused ones, which may not?
Well, I think
there's
there's 2 points there, isn't there? I think the challenge that the local supplier has had is not necessarily the mains work. It's the supply to homes and blocks of houses, and I think our network is probably more in line with the mains rather than individual homes. So I think they are making progress in that area. We've got a ministerial group that looks at gas. But I do think we're all got a heightened awareness, obviously, after what's happened on the island. So I think some of those increased reporting has been because of the heightened awareness. But yeah, I think there's been good progress made, actually.
Thank you.
That's fair to say. Yeah.
You've heard of ministerial group. I mean, the Minister for Home Affairs is the primary responsibility. What liaison do you have with him?
So the Minister for Home Affairs, the Chief Minister, the Minister of Environment, and myself, we meet on probably a quarterly basis and review gas.
Okay.
Minister, on that point, what is it at the moment? We've recently amended the gas law, so that must have been part of your discussions. But is there any specific areas of future work that will be handed over to the next council ministers in this area?
Well, I think the next council ministers, my advice to them would be to continue to have the ministerial gas group. I think, as I said, I think good progress has been made. I don't think we can afford to be complacent, so I think we need to keep a watching brief, would be my personal view.
Okay, thanks, sir. Moving on then, if I may, to the public realm. I think it was in January 2026, Minister, when we had a private briefing from you. Yeah. Can you please provide an update on progress in relation to the work stream since then?
Well, I think we've just been talking about a large part of the work at the moment, which is the Western Bus Gateway. I stopped on my way to the hearing this morning to poke my head, as I often do, into the works on Broad Street. The street furniture is arriving imminently. I'm looking around me. I know it's. I don't know if it's on the island, but it's on its way. We are due to plant a couple of trees in Broad Street, and we should be out of the works in Broad Street. We should be completed by the end of this month, and I think it's going to be great. I really do think it's going to be great. And the next phase is we may. I'm not sure when we're going to do it. We're going to remove the tree outside the Blue Note and plant that at Port Marquet, in the park at Port Marquet. We want to remove the apple crusher, but I've told officers it can't be removed until I know where it's going. It's not going to go into storage. We've got some exciting plans for one of our local parks, which is coming up to a major anniversary in the near future, which we'd like to plant a small orchard and have a feature on the local cider industry, and that would be appropriate to put it in there. So watch this space, I'd say.
And also in terms of trees, we're planting 6 more trees on the Western Bus Gateway. And in the South West Town Master Plan, part of that was to be a gateway feature into St Helier. So we're helping to contribute to that with the International Finance Centre as that gets developed.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, I don't know if you've seen, I thought we were putting soakaways in when I saw the product. Tris will be able to explain this, but when we're planting trees, we're putting in a device that would allow the trees to grow without disturbing the pavement and the road and anything else, and the utilities. What's that called?
I can't tell you the product name. I'd need our landscape architect to tell me that. But it's about planting the trees in ground, but in such a way that they don't harm the utility apparatus
Really
and the rest of the infrastructure.
So the the tree that's the quite mature tree at the Blue Note will be removed, but then there will be more trees.
So,
Yes.
Yeah, so if you look at the tree at the Blue Note, that is breaking up pavements and also impacting on drains, our drains and private drains. So we have to do something with it. We found a location at the country park at Port Marquet. It's just about the timing so that we're not planting it in August.
But we
For
will
obvious
have
reasons.
more trees rather than less
Yeah.
by the end of
The
this.
thing is, you would have seen that in the drawings. There's, we're trying to, and the other thing I'm hoping is going to happen very soon. It's an ongoing discussion. Is the pollarding of the existing trees in Broad Street? Now's the time to be, if it's not too late already, to be doing that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Again, back in January, you addressed representatives from across the construction engineering sectors at the ICE, Island Construction Engineering Programme. That included investments in public realm improvements. Can you identify any outcomes since then?
Well, the ICE programme is we briefed members, and we then did a subsequent briefing to some of the consultant, so the professional services from the construction industry about the framework agreement. So that was well received, and we're trying to make it easier for businesses. Once they've registered with us, they don't have to do it every time they want to bid for some work. We've got the main information on board. So yeah, I think I hope that dialogue continues with industry going forward. I think it's important to give them confidence, particularly to train new staff and to invest in equipment that they can see the pipeline, not only for the government but also our arm's length organisations.
As we're nearing election time, I recall the last election, the construction industry were anxious to give presentations to forthcoming states members about what they perceived as a lack of knowledge as to forward planning, so they could actually gear up for it. I mean, so the ICE programme gives them what they want, does it?
Well, I'm sure they'd like more. But what the ICE programme does is gives the industry how confident we are in terms of investing. And so I think we call it readiness now rather than confidence. So the readiness of each of the programmes. So I think it's been well received by the industry. And that readiness will change as plans get passed. So the planning committee meets in 2 weeks' time, and we'll know if some of our projects are passed or not passed. And so we'll be able to turn the dial up or down because we'll know whether we can invest or not invest.
Right, thank you.
Minister, something around public realm we have not touched on for a while is some of the parks, for example, and I know Millbrook Park, for example, is something that you've been working on. Is that do you see that its time frame is still there? Or?
Well, I had hoped that the pump track at Millbrook would be opening about now, actually, because we are in March. I'm hopeful it will be open by the end of June. We've had terrific encouragement from the community towards that. We've worked with the donor of the land. We've worked with the neighbours at the church on the programme. So hopefully, and I've got a site visit. I think at the end tomorrow afternoon. I think I've got a site visit with the Constable of St Lawrence to explain what we're trying to do there. But Trees for Life have worked with us, and we've planted some trees recently. We've worked with the Battle of Flowers, for example, to ensure that floats can still access the large green area between the day parade and the night parade. So they've actually done a trial run by taking a float in the proposed paths, and we've made some slight amendments to the paths after that trial. So yeah, we're quite encouraged. I love Millbrook Park. I think it's one of our jewels in our crown, but we've got a number. Winston Churchill Park is terrific. We've invested heavily at Coronation Park, at Millennium Park, in play equipment, but the green areas and the fact that we do things like the week of music in Coronation Park. I don't know if I have to declare an interest because I quite like to go into one or two of those events. It's terrific. It's terrific.
And you were mentioning a number of parks, and of course they fall into whether it's in the parish's responsibility or the government responsibilities. And I was wondering, I have been contacted recently about St Andrew's Park because their playground was closed quite a while ago and said it would open and it hasn't, or it keeps opening and closing.
So I can say with a fair degree of confidence that's a parish park as opposed to a
Yeah.
government park.
So it's something to
There's
raise with St Helier.
Yeah, yeah. And it is, they've had issues, I think, with the zip wire there and other things, but as it's somewhere that I go and walk my dog occasionally, I'm fairly familiar with it.
Thank you, Minister.
On a lead, I hasten to add.
Lead. I was going to say that, but maybe it was
You read our report already, have you? Switching yet again on the subject of PFAS. Following publication of the government's interim response to PFAS Scientific Advisory Panel recommendations in Report 4, are you able to provide, please, more information about what consideration you have given to date on the management of biosolids in relation to PFAS?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think I've got that information in front of me. I'm going to have to hand over to somebody. Is that going to be you, Ellen?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we do test, so our solid waste team and liquid waste team have been part of the PFAS steering group. We do test for our enhanced treated sludge and there's work, so obviously there's some review of that and it meets the standards, and we are comfortable at the moment of where and what we're putting onto land.
And the standards are international standards rather than Jersey standards.
Yes.
And is it internationally, are those being looked at, kind of like the water standards? I know that they're being looked at as well internationally to see whether there is a need to change. Is that the same with?
That'll be the conversations that we're having with those steering groups. At the moment, we are making sure that we are doing the testing of those sludges, and I'm sure that will advance as we have further discussions as we gather more data in the future on that side.
So
No.
you talk as in that working group is kind of dialed into the discussions internationally about those standards.
So we've seen a reduction in the PFAS recorded in the biosolids produced at Balazan because we've stopped receiving effluent, I dare say, is it, from the airport, and we've seen a reduction of 2/3 of PFAS. Although the PFAS levels were low before, they're lower now, and therefore that impacts on the biosolids that are a byproduct of what we receive in. Yeah. And we measure the water as it comes in and as it goes out. We measure the water at First Tower, the sewage treatment works. So the team are, I think we're all more well versed than when I started two years ago in PFAS and that kind of thing, which I was unaware of.
A few general questions around this. I mean, in relation to the Island's investment in infrastructure generally to manage PFAS exposure, I mean, what options are there, or are you considering further options as to how we better manage it?
I think the question is probably better aimed at the people that manage our water rather than our waste, because it's a subject that we're going to be debating in the Assembly in the coming days about PFAS and the levels of PFAS and the targets that we set for PFAS. We manage the outputs, so when the water has been used generally, when it comes to us, but we are monitoring that much more closely, more frequently, and since we stopped receiving the water from the airport, we've seen a significant improvement.
Again, it's the same question really. I mean, what considerations can you give, or are you giving, or are able to give regarding managing the level in the future as regards to your long-term planning?
Well, I think it's I think it is more about the water that we produce, and then let's not forget that PFAS is found in food and a whole range of things, and water is just one element of that. And we, as I said, we had low levels of PFAS at the sewage treatment works, and that has reduced by 2/3 since we stopped receiving water from the airport. So I think that's good. We can't stop monitoring. We need to continue to monitor. And we also need to monitor the soil that we receive at the Collet, and that work's underway. But I think the levels on the island are generally lower than what's deemed to be acceptable levels, and it's what target do we set for the future.
And monitoring generally, is that, from what you just said, is that responsibility in your view of Jersey Water rather than yourselves?
Well, it's probably more to deal with the Environment Department and the Regulation Department. They're the people rather than the Infrastructure Department.
Okay.
Would it be all right?
Yeah. Although we do, obviously, we've got a monitoring regime. So as the Minister's mentioned, we have a number of areas that we monitor on a monthly basis.
Minister, you've said several times that stopping of the water, that's has reduced the amount. But where does that water then go? Is it has to go somewhere else? If we're stopping intake into Belazan, I'm just wondering if that means that's actually it's reduced over everywhere else, or if there's actually there has to be found another where.
Well, it was going through they did have a licence to pump some of that water through the foul sewer network, and that licence has been suspended, I understand. I'll have to go to my team to ask what is a good question, but I don't know the answer.
That's a question I think for Ports of Jersey, so we can come back to you on that side. So
Yes.
at the moment, on that.
Thank you. And where to go? And I suppose the next one is a discussion probably to be had about what the infrastructure that we've been discussing with the Environment Minister as well, that would have to be put in place to reduce when if the new standard drinking water standard comes in.
Yeah.
And what the byproduct waste of that could be, because of course that potentially the byproduct of reducing PFAS in our drinking water system could have whatever it is, whether it's activated carbon or something, that there could be a byproduct of that collects that PFAS. Where does that go?
Well, ultimately, if waste is created, it will end up with us under licence, and I would need to come back to you on that. I don't know the technical answer to that.
I think that's the steering group are looking at those options. So depending again what measure gets agreed, what would be and how would we treat that waste, and I think that's all being reviewed at the moment. So there are different options obviously being considered.
So that would be part of that discussion, because of course we've got the standard that can be put in place whether we have a technology decided or not, but when the technology is being discussed about how to do that, the waste product will be.
Yeah, so if we consider our current waste streams, some of our waste is exported under licence. Whether the byproduct from the PFAS treatment is one of those products that can be exported under licence, or whether that's got to go into a cell. As we sit here today, I don't know the answer to that question, but it's a question we're going to have to find the answer to.
Thank you.
Back to you, Chairman.
Yes, so now it will be on Jersey Property Holdings. So you haven't sat there.
Absolutely.
As the last question area for the Minister. So during our standalone public hearing on the topic of Jersey Property Holdings in October, the panel was informed in relation to leases of public land and facilities that as leases come up, we've tried to get everybody onto that level playing field. That is a process that we will take quite a piece of time. Are you able to update the panel about how the work is to achieve this level playing field in relation to leasing of public land and facilities, and how it's progressed?
Well, as we've said previously, as each lease comes to the end of its time, then we look at putting it onto the level playing field, and that's going to take some time to work through because we've got leases and licenses of various lengths. But the team are doing some good stuff, and I was with a couple of members of the team on Monday afternoon in the East of the Island looking at some land that we're involved with. I have to say, I'm pleased with the progress we've made in property holdings, notwithstanding some of the challenges we've had. I think that over the last 2 years, one of the areas we've made good improvement, and we've made improvements in a number of areas, but I do think the team at Property Holdings have risen to the challenge, and there are many challenges. And I said before, in the State Assembly, we've got 48 property experts and me, and the team have to deal with that and different interventions. Tim and I visited a school recently, and we surprised the head teacher when we reminded them of the service level agreement that we have with schools. So it's ongoing. I think Property Holdings has been moved from Treasury to infrastructure. I think if I leave a report when I go out of the door, I would suggest that an Assistant Chief Minister looks after Property Holdings, including all the property from education, and probably sits as an Assistant Minister in both education and infrastructure, so that things can be even more coordinated going forward. But the officers do some good stuff. We read in the paper this week, I think it was, about Lamont Street and coordinating the arm's length organisations. I was trying to do that in 2018 when I was chair of Jersey Business, because there's a lot of synergies to that. For the last 15 months, Tim and the team have been trying to get some of those arm's length organisations to take up the office space at Jubilee Wharf. That is one of our properties which is fit for purpose. The Lamont Street properties, I think, would need significant investment. But we have struggled because of the different lengths of contracts and leases people have got. I think some organisations like their independence in inverted commas, but I think there's great opportunity to bring some of them. We have had some success, but not as quickly or as much success as we'd like in that area.
And Jubilee Wharf is now full, so it's no longer a net outgoing to the department.
And that's full of ALOs.
There are some ALOs. There are also some wider uses with the bailiffs' chambers as well. So.
And would that be then explored in the future as well to see if that can be even more optimised? And
exactly,
whether there's a carrot and stick?
continues to be a priority, and there is some work at the moment from the health estate in terms of the development of Overdale and the rest of the estate, what's going to happen at Kensington and Gloucester Street, and what the implications then are for the other properties around town, how we can consolidate the estate and either realise capital gains or use those properties constructively.
Thank you. The panel, of course, we've talked about before in other hearings and in the Assembly that there has been 2 recent tendering processes that have taken place, for example, with the Lido and NICRA. Have there been any lessons learned from those tendering processes?
Of course it has, and I think we're always learning. There's a lot of emphasis placed on Duret Olson's report. I suggest to people to read paragraph 55 of that report, because I think that was the most telling paragraph in the whole document. I'm delighted that the Jersey Business have succeeded in getting both parties to agree terms so we can move forward, so we can lodge a 168 and hopefully new tenants can get into Havre de Par. And I foresee Havre de Par being much more of a community asset going forward. I'm really encouraged by the vision, and I'm excited by that.
But what specific lessons could be put into other tendering? Because both of them have taken a long time.
They have,
as
and
well.
And they're complex, and that's the challenge we had, and they're different. Le Creux, we've got a very, very long lease on that land, but we don't own the land. So therefore we have to liaise with the owner of the land about any changes we may or may not want to do. So that takes time, and when you're dealing with volunteers and people who are well intended and got good ideas, you've got to give them the best opportunity to deliver. And I think my learning from Hovde Park, we had external support, and we should have run the external support from start to finish. I've said that before, and that's not a criticism of the people in the department. The people in the department have worked incredibly hard in incredibly difficult circumstances, and that again was recognised by Duet Olsen in his report. And I'm pleased that the initial preferred party for Le Creux also in their letter to us recognise the efforts of the team at Jersey Property Holdings. So I think going forward, perhaps more surety in the what we're looking for, and we should be perhaps stricter. We allowed one group to participate who claimed they were a charity. They weren't a charity, and we allowed that process to go forward. That caused some confusion. I think perhaps we should be a little bit stricter with processes would probably be my observation.
Stricter, and in this last state sitting, you talked about the preferred bidder not going forward in Le Creux. What happens after that with the process? You didn't talk about that.
We had again we shortlisted to two, and so we're in discussions with the party that was the second bidder in that process. But before we get too far down the road with them, we have to liaise with the owner of the land, because if planning applications are required, we need to make sure that the owner is happy with us making such an application, rather than us getting further down the road with the second party and then to find out the owner's not happy with what we want to do. And that's been delayed due to absence off Ireland. And I'm hoping that we can get that up and running pretty quickly. That's been, yeah.
In our specific hearing on this subject, you stated that you received fortnightly updates on any empty properties we have, and that I get the update, I get the value of the rent, so we can actually start to see things from a commercial aspect. Can you provide any observations of trends related to public properties, public properties since October, and has this changed since you've kind of been more focused on?
Well, it's not since October. Since I came into office, we've done that fortnightly update, and we've seen properties that were empty for a long period of time that are now active, and properties are empty at times because of departments' wishes or needs. We've released some properties. I think we had a property go through court recently, which Carol Dean, which would have been subject to a 168, I think.
Yes, there are some minor technical issues on the drainage that we're resolving, and that'll be...
That's due to transfer soon. So, yeah, I think I believe it's a good discipline. If you were in a commercial world, that's something you would do, because it's an asset. So what is the cost of that asset? What's the value of that asset? Do you need that asset, or do you release it? And I think it's a fairly good discipline. We have got an officer-led team, which I forget the name of the group. Tim, you'll remind me of
the Corporate Property Management Board.
So that meets frequently. As I said, I would suggest that if there's an assistant chief minister that looks after property, that they probably attend that board. So I think there's been focus. We're not the finished article. It's really difficult when you've got people who use a facility that believe they own the facility 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's not the case. So.
Minister, you talked, for example, about Lamotte Street, which of course went out for expression of interest, but I don't. If you could give an update, maybe, because that's one of the properties.
The tender closes tomorrow, lunchtime tomorrow, I think. So we'll have more information, hopefully, tomorrow.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to seeing that, and I suppose turning to schools, we've talked about in the past not only about this links that you've had, these contracts with the schools, but of course the focus on maintenance has been focusing on fire and fire safety in schools, and we talked about that during the budget process as well. And you talked about that we're still doing a lot of work, and we have to mitigate in some premises where we have not completed the work yet. Are you able to give an update on fire safety works in the schools?
Well, where we haven't done physical work, we've got mitigation in place. So we would have additional members of staff who are there as fire safety wardens. Is that what you call them?
Yes, it's a combination of an act of sort of observation to mitigate against the outbreak of fire, but also to make sure that fire loading and the use of the premises is orientated more to a sort of a more safety aspect. We're also, we've gone to the Treasury to seek additional funds this year so that we can accelerate the works that the Minister was referring to, so that we can reduce the burden on the school's operational activities and allow them to concentrate on teaching rather than being part-time firemen.
And I think it's fair to say that the legislation and the understanding of fire is always increasing, and we get more information, so we have to, what was acceptable 20 years ago is not acceptable today. So some of these buildings, when they were built and passed all the criteria changes, and what we're trying to do is have best practice in all of our public buildings.
And we have written to you, Minister, in the past about also how to prioritise more general maintenance in schools. And we've heard recently, we've just had a submission about the Kennevein and the roof. Apparently there has been, from the storm, there is substantial damage to the roof, but that, wondering where that priority is, like how does that prioritisation?
So my understanding
works?
from that is I've had similar correspondence, and I've had assurances that there's no water ingress, that the works were due to take place last week.
Yes, I believe the works have taken place, but they were prioritised. There was no water ingress. The site was made safe, and we were focusing our activities where there were leaks, where there was sort of ongoing damage that we needed to address. So there is an active prioritisation. The Minister said in the past our resources are limited, and it does require difficult decisions to be made. So.
Yeah. Thank you. And finally, Minister, you said in our last hearing we're looking at what we can do with Andium to help us manage our properties, our homes that we have on our books, because they're experts in changing tenants and receiving rents and maintenance, etc. Has this work, have you progressed with this work? Is it complete? What can you provide an update on?
So we were due to receive some people from another department into property holdings, and I've said let's not do that until we understand the benefits and the alternatives, and that work I believe has been completed.
So I think the policy in terms of the specifically key worker accommodation and how the various departments within the government provide key worker accommodation, the balance between the occupier and the department and who pays continues to be a bit of a challenge. There are a number of different models depending on which department and whereabouts in the department you work. That sort of policy work is still ongoing, but we continue to plan how we would outsource key worker accommodation.
Thank you. I suppose my last question on this is something because we've touched on Jersey Property Holdings since the beginning of our hearings together, and our specific focused hearing. Minister, as coming to the end of your experience as Minister of Infrastructure at the moment, is there something, apart from you've talked about an assistant minister specifically focused in this, is there anything wider that probably is underway that needs to be finalised or could be commenced?
I think it should be an assistant chief minister. So reporting into the Chief Minister, because you need to have the support, and it's a terrific asset for us, the property that we have. There are opportunities, I believe, to work with both Andium and SOJDC, as we are doing with Fort Regent, for example. But yeah, we've spent so much time on what would you would expect to be minor things, and Hoftapar is an example of that. Clearly, it's not minor to the people involved, but the time that's consumed from the department is totally off the scale compared to issuing a new lease. And you know, it's unfortunate that that's prevented other work from being completed. But I would be making a recommendation that an assistant chief minister heads up the property, and as I said earlier, sits on both as an assistant education minister and assistant infrastructure minister. And I think that's possibly a way to go forward. And that person would have the time and the bandwidth to look at alternative models and getting even better utilisation of our existing estate, because certainly I haven't had the capacity to do that.
So, do you envisage in that wish that greater connection, collaboration with Ports of Jersey, for instance, on property matters?
Well, my personal view is that Port of Jersey should be operating ports and not property developing. We've got the SOJDC as a government arm's length organisation to develop property, but I'll reiterate that's a personal view.
Has that been discussed at ministerial level?
I think we have differing views at ministerial levels. You know, I understand that Port of Jersey have got to generate funds to operate the ports, and clearly they see property as one way of doing that. So,
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Minister, we've come to the end of our main questions, and it's something that we've asked our other two ministers that we scrutinise is, looking back over your term, is there anything that has been the most challenging for you, for lessons learnt, and what would you advise the incoming Minister for Infrastructure?
not to look at social media.
Well, that's a given.
Would be my advice to the incoming minister, because it won't be me. It has played havoc with myself, with my family. Some of the accusations made by people who should know better is quite frankly irresponsible. It's led me to take personal legal advice. It's cost me sleepless nights. It's impacted on my health. And I'm weary as I come to the end of my time. There's a fantastic team of officers. Some of them sitting here today, others you've met. A fantastic team of officers who deserve, they need to be challenged, absolutely need to be challenged, but they deserve our support. And I was quite heartened today to read in the newspaper that a candidate who's declared today has put ageing infrastructure as one of the key things that should be done. So I'm going to leave infrastructure, I believe, with a higher profile than when I arrived. I think, so I'd take that as a success. There's lots of things I'd love to have done. I wouldn't rule out being an assistant minister in infrastructure, because I think it's a terrific area, terrific team to work with. But I can tell you that I've had people in my office explain to them the impacts their words on social media had, and then they go on and continue to do that. And I think it's going to put off existing members, it will put off potential candidates, and it's so disappointing. So that would be my key advice to the next infrastructure minister. Having said that, I think we've achieved quite a lot. The team are fantastic. I couldn't speak highly enough, and that's not just the officers that you see, but the people on the front line. We saw in Storm Goretti lessons learned from Kieran, you know, the interactive map that's done by dedicated public servants of this island. We saw with all of the heavy rain. I was in Madeira. I read 2 emails when I was in Madeira, because they were advising of the real genuine concerns on the railway walk, where we have gas and main sewers running down there. And the person sat to my left went on his way home, stood for hours in the rain to ensure that things got done. And the dedication of these people is phenomenal, and I pay tribute to them, because people don't see that. People think of our officers as being overpaid and lazy. Well, let me tell you, we've got officers who are totally committed, and right across the department, and I'm proud of them all.
Thank you. And thank you, Minister. And we've come to our end of time, so I just want to say thank you so much for attending our hearings, and also for the officers as well for all the support, both within the briefings that you've given us and also, of course, during the hearing, and support to the Minister.
Well, and thank you as well, because you've been challenging, but you've been engaged, and you've taken the time to go and look at things firsthand. And I hope the next panel does the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.